He had been here before, or so it felt. As the tram rolled down the cobbled street in Prague, a faint tremor passed through Eliot's spine. He leaned against the cold glass window, watching the raindrops trace chaotic paths, colliding like destinies or memories, fleeting, intersecting, vanishing. The buildings outside, ochre facades, iron balconies, a beggar with a violin, all conspired in their silence to whisper, "You've seen this." He sat upright, heart accelerating, eyes wide with eerie familiarity. Not just the street. The tram, the smell of wet upholstery, even the precise moment when a child dropped a red mitten and his mother shouted something in Czech. It had already happened. Not just similar, identical, déjà vu, a glitch in memory, a metaphysical message, a neurological hiccup. Eliot was no ordinary traveler. A professor of cognitive science and part-time poet, he was in Prague not for sightseeing but for silence. A sabbatical to write his next book on memory, perception, and the strange ghosts that wander between them. That red mitten haunted him all the way to his apartment in Mala Strana. He dropped his coat, sat at his desk, and opened a new document. The cursor blinked impatiently. He typed, "What is déjà vu from a scientific point of view?" And then paused. Because if there was one thing Eliot knew, it was this. Science doesn't always begin with answers. Sometimes it begins with a red mitten on a rainy afternoon and the peculiar feeling that reality is folding over itself. The first known mention of the phenomenon called déjà vu, literally already seen in French, came from Émile Boirac in the late 19th century. But the experience itself? As old as awareness, as old as dreams. Let us begin not with definitions, but with mysteries. The year was 1955. A young man named William, aged 23, was admitted to a psychiatric hospital in Wales. He was bright, articulate, and deeply disturbed. His complaint? He believed every moment of his life was a repetition. Every sound, every sight, every encounter had happened before, exactly as it was happening now. Unlike typical déjà vu, which lasts mere seconds, William's experience was chronic. The doctors called it persistent déjà vu, a condition so rare that most textbooks never mention it. Tests showed no brain lesions, no signs of temporal lobe epilepsy. And yet, William remained imprisoned in a living loop, endlessly repeating. Some dismissed it as a dissociative disorder. Others saw it as an extreme manifestation of a faulty memory circuit. But William insisted he wasn't ill. Reality was. So what happens in the brain during déjà vu? Modern neuroscience has a few suspects. The leading candidate is the medial temporal lobe, particularly the hippocampus and surrounding structures, the regions responsible for memory encoding and retrieval. The hippocampus is like a librarian filing away your experiences, but sometimes it misfires. It might tag a current event as already retrieved, even though it hasn't been stored. This creates the illusion of familiarity. Think of it like opening a brand new book, but feeling as if you've read it before. Not because you have, but because your brain has accidentally stamped it as familiar. This theory, called the dual processing hypothesis, suggests that there are two pathways in memory. One for processing a new experience, and one for recognizing familiar experiences. If the latter activates prematurely or independently, you get déjà vu. But this elegant theory has a problem. It doesn't explain everything. Take this account from 2007. A woman named Claudia described an episode where she entered a bookstore she'd never visited. She walked to the second floor, turned left, and suddenly froze. "I knew what book was on the third shelf," she said later. "I even knew a passage from it." The book was there. The passage matched. So was this still déjà vu? Or precognition? No, Claudia had visited that same bookstore 10 years prior in childhood. She didn't remember it consciously, but her brain had retained fragments. The layout, the color of the walls, the rhythm of the spiral staircase. This is called cryptomnesia, when forgotten memories re-emerge but are mistaken for entirely new experiences. It's the ghost of memory dressed as a stranger. So perhaps déjà vu is not about time folding. It's about memory failing, beautifully, subtly, momentarily. But what if memory isn't failing? What if it's remembering something we were never meant to access? It was a Thursday evening when Eliot wandered into the archive of Charles University. The librarian, an elderly man with bushy eyebrows and the calmness of someone who has seen many storms come and go, handed him a folder. "Early work on temporal anomalies," the man said in Czech-accented English. Inside were yellowed pages from forgotten scientists, including a neurologist named Dr. Zena Hertzfeld. In a 1962 paper, never published but meticulously documented, Hertzfeld described a curious case, a patient who experienced déjà vu during near-death trauma. While drowning, the patient reported a cascade of replayed memories, but not from her own life. "They weren't mine," she had said. "They were from someone else, a woman. I saw her wedding, her children, her regrets, all of it in seconds." Hertzfeld speculated, without hard data but with poetic boldness, that déjà vu might not be a memory at all. Perhaps it was a momentary resonance with another consciousness, somewhere in the architecture of space-time. Eliot raised an eyebrow. This wasn't science, it was metaphysics dressed as neurology. And yet, something tugged at him. There is a lesser-known theory in neuroscience called the hologram hypothesis. The idea is simple, profound, and unsettling. Memory in the brain might be stored not like a library of books, but like a hologram, distributed across a network. Carl Pribram, one of its early proponents, suggested that each memory is not stored in a single place, but spread across regions. Damage one area, and you may still recall fragments. This is similar to how a holographic plate can be broken, yet each piece still contains the whole image, blurred, partial, but present. But here's the twist. If memories are holographic, then familiarity can be triggered by partial matches. A smell, a sound, a curve of a stranger's face might light up a fragment, just enough to simulate a full experience. Déjà vu, then, could be the brain trying to complete a puzzle it never saw, using pieces that almost fit. This theory explains the eerie rightness of déjà vu, the way it feels not just familiar, but destined. The brain is trying to resolve a pattern, and in doing so, creates a temporary illusion of certainty. But Eliot knew that even this theory had gaps. What about the timing? The split-second feeling that fades just as fast. Why do some people experience déjà vu frequently, while others never do? Why did he experience it that day in Prague? Now we must pause. Because there is a question that haunts every scientist, every philosopher, every soul who has stared into the strange corridor of déjà vu. What if the experience isn't an error? What if it's a signal, a marker, a breadcrumb? Eliot's thoughts turned to quantum theories, not because he believed them all, but because they offered metaphors for the unknowable. In quantum mechanics, there is a phenomenon called superposition, where a particle exists in multiple states until observed. Could consciousness, too, operate in a probabilistic space where possibilities overlap? Some fringe physicists and a few brave psychologists have speculated that déjà vu might be the mind brushing against a neighboring version of reality, a parallel track in the multiverse. Nonsense? Perhaps. But what if déjà vu is not just the brain echoing its own memories, but synchronizing for a heartbeat with the echo of another life you might have lived?